Completely. Thank you, Wesley. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Yuni Hariyanti, and I am a representative from LIA Depok. And I'd like to say thank you very much, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present my result of Classroom Action Research. Okay, and I'm going to talk about the use of oral corrective feedback in my classroom. Can it improve students' writing skills? So in this discussion, I'm going to talk about the background, the introduction, the reasons for choosing my topic, the theoretical framework, the data analysis, the result and discussion, and also the conclusion. Okay, so now let's start with the background first. So we start with the problem. Okay, so the problem is writing is a challenging skill for GEP students, okay? So I actually reflect this from the class that I had back then. So I taught TI for 2 terms in a row, and they had exactly the same problem and also others. So they have a low ability in creating short stories. As you guys know that in the AI4, students are asked to write a short story, okay? And they have to submit it as one of the compulsory assignments. Okay, and the problem that I analyzed was that because they didn't have enough practices, especially in writing in the AI3, so there is a kind of gap of writing activity from the AI3 to the AI4. Okay, so I conduct this research to somehow fill in the gap of that writing activity. So after giving the I3 students extra writing practices and give them the written feedback, I still have this kind of problem, okay? So they kept on repeating the same mistakes. So before I implemented using oral corrective feedback, I used written feedback first. But the problem was still there, okay? So they still made some mistakes in their writing, okay? And because of that reason, this research was undertaken to explore if oral corrective feedback can be an alternative to help students improve their writing skill. Okay, so this is actually more or less the same as the problem that I mentioned previously. So most of my students in the I4 told me that the writing assignment in the I4 was very hard. Okay, it was very difficult for them to create a short story because even in creating a simple story is still challenging for them. Okay, and the problem that also they had back then was that they got stuck because they were not sure what to write. And many students also wrote story with scattered ideas that made the storyline difficult to follow. So there are lots of jumping ideas in students' writing. And even in their piece of writing, in some of their work, I couldn't find the conflict in the story, which I think is a very important aspect in a short story. And I also had problems with students' grammatical mistakes all over their writing. Okay, so about the reasons for choosing the topic. Okay, so the first reason, back again, I want to fill in the gap that I think they have for the I3 to the I4. Okay, and then because of the issue that they had back then, so the students dealt with idea block and then scattered idea, and also the storyline is difficult to follow, and also the grammatical mistakes. So reflecting on these writing limitations of the I4 students, there should be a bridging writing exercises before teachers can ask them to write a short story as the final assignment. So these bridging exercises are meant to equip them with how to gather ideas before writing, use the format based on the type of writing they write, and sharpen their grammatical sensitivity. Okay, and I believe that these practices should be initiated at least a level before the I4, which is in the I3. Okay, so I'm going to discuss just a little bit, okay, from the theoretical framework. So this is the 6 different ways that can we use if we want to apply oral corrective feedback. So the first one is explicit correction. So in this type of correction, the correction is given to indicate and identify the errors. At the same time, the corrector also provides the correction. So we give the right form right away, okay? And then the second one is elicitation. It is repeating the student's utterances without pointing out the mistake. So we don't show them clearly for the mistake that they made. And then a meta-linguistic feedback. In this feedback, students get some comments on the mistake without correcting it. So this is actually the method that I use for the first cycle in my research. And then the fourth one is clarification requests. So this feedback aims to stimulate students to fix their mistakes through reformulation or repetition. So instead of giving them, like long comments, you just say like sorry after they give a wrong utterance, for example. And then the next one is recast. So the corrector implicitly corrects students' mistake. And the last one is repetition. So in this type of feedback, the corrector highlights the student's error by repeating the student's utterances. Okay, so by repeating these utterances, the corrector want them to realize that, oh, maybe I made something wrong with this sentence, okay? So to make them understand that they made something wrong. Okay, so now let's talk about the research methodology. So I will cover 3 points under the research methodology. So it's the research time and setting, and then the second one is research participants and research methods. All right, so I conducted this research in 1 term of teaching. So I started this one on April, actually, okay? I started with the observation stage. So I observed my students for about 4 weeks. I actually always do this, okay? Before I started to give them the treatment, I set this amount of time for me to observe them, to really get to know them, because in LIA Depok, we always have different students every term. So for the first month, I always use that to get to know my students. And then I started giving them the pre-test on May 13. And then I started the first cycle on May 20. And then the second cycle is on June 4. And the last one was on June 17, 2022. Okay. So the research method is adopted from Camis and McTaggart. This one, as you guys can see. So I planned and then do the action, observe and reflect. And then after that, I revise the plan, do the action, observe, and also reflect. So I'm going to share with you guys about the detailed procedure for the first cycle. So the first one is I conducted the pre-test. So I asked them to write about their experience in using herbal medicine. And I asked them to write about 100 until 150 words. And they have to submit it. They have to submit their work using Google Drive. And then on the first treatment, I asked them to draw a mind map. Okay. So after they draw a mind map, I collected all the mind map that they drew. And then after that, I give them the oral corrective feedback based on the mind map that they made. Okay, so that's the first treatment. And then the second treatment after that, I give them like assignment on the spot because, oh yeah, I forgot to mention that this classroom was done fully offline. Okay, so at the beginning I had an online session, but only for the observation stage. So the research itself was conducted based on the offline class. And then the second treatment was making outline. So I asked them to create an outline based on the mind map that they made before. Okay, and after that, I collected all the outline, and then I gave them the feedback. Okay, and then the next one is I asked them to develop it into a paragraph. All right, so that is becoming the post-task for the first cycle. And then I gave them oral corrective feedback again. And then the detailed procedure for cycle 2 is almost the same. So I always started with developing a mind map, and then asked them to make an outline, and then I asked them to develop it into a paragraph. Okay. So it's not like directly they had to, write a piece of writing 100 to 150 words, no, but we started from creating the mind map and then making the outline, and also we develop into a paragraph. But for every steps that we had, I always give them the oral corrective feedback. Okay, so let's talk about the research participants. So at the beginning, I had 16 students as my research participants. But then one student decided to quit after the first month because she needed to focus more on her school exams, while another student took the online scene. Okay, so in total, I had 14 students, 7 males and 7 females join this research. And they were between 14 to 15 years old. Let's talk about the data analysis. So how did I collect the data? So I gave time to do the observation, as I mentioned in the beginning. And then I gave them questionnaires. I gave them 2 questionnaires. And then I also interviewed them at the end of the term, because that was the only time left. I didn't have any other time. Okay, and then the techniques of data analysis. So the analysis of the quantitative data was done by comparing the mean score from the pre and post-test. This comparison was used to see if there was an improvement after students received the treatment. The pre and the post-test are scored using a writing rubric from Jacob et al. 1981. So as you guys can see, this is the writing rubric that I used. I didn't create it by myself, of course. I just took it from a source. Okay. So content and organization, and then vocabulary, language use, and also mechanics. Language use is more about the grammar. Okay. So I compare their results between pre and also post test. So this is the result. Okay, so for content itself, as you can see, there is an improvement. Not much from pre-test to cycle 1, but if you look at from pre-test to post-test, I think it's quite significant. And then for vocabulary, so I didn't have a lot of improvement in the first cycle. That is also the reason why I continued to second cycle. And the result is also improving for vocabulary. And also organization, it's also improving. Mechanics, okay. So interestingly, I didn't have any improvement. So they started pretty good, and yeah, they didn't show any improvement, okay, for the mechanics. Okay, so this is the increasing mean score. So they started with 64, and then they ended up with 84. Okay. So this is the mean score of every component in writing rubric. So only one is not showing any progress. Okay, so this is the result from the questionnaire. Okay, so I asked them whether they like getting the oral corrective feedback, and they said things like this. So at first, they said that they did not understand the written feedback. So that was the reason why I kept on having students making the same mistakes all over again. So yeah, that's the reason that they said to me. And then they also claim that the oral corrective feedback can give them a higher motivation and also emotional closeness with me as the teacher, because it's kind of different, okay? When you give the comments, the correction orally, it's different. And then by using oral corrective feedback, they say that they could understand the feedback right away. So that's the difference that they felt based on the questionnaire. And then another questionnaire result. So the implementation of oral corrective feedback in writing series in the I3 class has improved students' confidence in writing. So approximately 3/4 of the participants believe that their writing ability had improved. Okay, so the same percentage of participants showed that they enjoyed the writing series they did. Students' enjoyment of writing was a substantial element of this research, because without having a strong willingness, they would not complete the writing based on a given deadline. So this is also one of the biggest challenges that I dealt with. Maybe Bu Francisca also deal with the same problem. So the willingness that they have to keep, because it's to keep on writing and writing and writing. Okay, so the conclusion. So we thought that the students of the okay, this is from the initial reflection here. So students of the I4 always felt that the assignment to write shorts they did not get enough practice in the previous level, especially in the I3, where they should be more trained to write more. And then the improvement from the pre-test to the first cycle was not significant. In that cycle, the researcher, me in this case, gave meta-linguistic feedback. In the second cycle, the treatment given to the students was through explicit feedback. 100% of the students who filled out the questionnaire prefer to receive the explicit feedback. So that's why I switched to explicit feedback. The use of explicit oral corrective feedback was successful in improving students' writing abilities. The mean score of students' writing raised significantly. Students could improve 4 out of 5 components in the writing rubric. Okay, I think that's all from me, Bu Astrid. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibu Yuni. That's very interesting as well. So we have 2 presenters share their result of the result of their research on writing. I think this is something that many of us find challenging. Now, if Miss Yuni, would you, okay, thank you. Now, I would like to invite questions from the audience. Okay, Ibu Wening from LIA Pajajaran Bogor. Go ahead, Ibu. Ask your questions.
Yeah, thank you. My question is about meta-linguistic feedback. Could you please remind me, because at first I do understand, but later on I forgot it. Okay, sorry.
That's okay, Bu. Thank you for the question, Bu Wening. So in meta-linguistic feedback, the feedback is not given explicitly. Okay, so instead of telling them the correct form of the utterances that they made, which is not in the right form, yeah, Bu. So I just give them comments like, what tense do you use when you want to talk about past events? So maybe they write something like, she goes to Bali last week, for example. Okay, so instead of giving them the right form by saying she went to Bali last week, instead of doing that, I asked them questions like, what tense do you have to use when you talk about past experience?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I
At
got it.
first, I thought that it was going to be successful, bro, but in reality, no, it didn't work out. uh, yeah, some of my students told me that I still don't get it, ma'am. What do you mean? Something like that. Okay.
Yeah. So my next question is,
Sure.
you apply the oral feedback, right?
Yeah.
Instead of the written form. Don't you think that the oral corrections is easily forgotten? Because that's what I experience. So I prefer to use the written feedback corrections because I do it personally in the writing. For example, they keep on using I with the lower case instead of the capital letter, and it keeps on done by the students.
Right,
Moreover,
right.
maybe if it is done orally, what do you think?
Thank you for sharing your experience, Boo. Well, I usually use written feedback, especially for my adult students. Okay, but I also tried this, like giving them written feedback for this class, but it didn't work. So they simply did not read my feedback. They didn't give any comment, and they kept on having the same mistakes. Okay, so I think it depends on the characteristics of the students themselves. And for this class, I do not know. Maybe it's also related to online to offline as well, Boo,
Hmm.
because it was their first time having an offline session after studying in LIA for so long in online scene.
Mhm. May I add a little?
Yeah, sure, but
Okay, so I usually ask my students to post their writing in Padlet, so everybody can see my corrections to each student, so they can learn from my questions and my corrections, and also my corrections to other students, because they have to give a kind of love, likes, something like that, so they can learn a lot from the others.
yeah, right. I like to use Padlet as well, Buoning.
Okay, thank you for sharing your experience and ideas, Ibu Wening, and thank you for your answers, Miss Yuni. Now, that would conclude Miss Yuni's presentation. Now, I would like to invite all the members of our audience in our main session here. I have posted in our